Hey, good morning, everybody. We're continuing a series called In Your Face, where we talk about confrontation. And we're doing this series while Pastor Steve, our lead pastor, he's on sabbatical/vacation, and it gives me a chance to talk to you guys, and I appreciate that very much. Today, what we're going to be talking about is accountability. And accountability is kind of an agreement. It's where two people or a group of people can get together, and they give each other that permission to be open and honest with each other about the things that they're going through. And one of the great things about accountability is that it's a way for you to just kind of come in and express what it is that you're dealing with or going through, and you're able to talk to each other about the fact that this is what's really going on. Here's what's really taking place. You have a sounding board for somebody that can just say, but have you looked at it from this perspective? Have you looked at it from this angle? Because we're often very blind to our own issues and how we're dealing with things, and we have someone on the outside looking in saying, but have you taken a look at this? Some of you grew up in families where there was a lot of open communication. Okay, you were very open, very honest. Everybody was just, if they had a feeling, they expressed it. It just, everybody said whatever was on their hearts. Some of you had the opposite. Some of you had those families where everything was shut down. All feelings were just kind of shut, just kind of packed down into a tiny little space in their chest until it exploded later. And there was no open communication. Can some of y'all relate to what it is that I'm talking about? That was my family. We did not, let me tell you, they were the worst communicators on the history of the planet, just in the history of the world, just the absolute worst. And I have a somewhat personal story that demonstrates that. For the first 2 weeks of my life, my name was Amy. Your hearing is fine. For the first 2 weeks of my life, my name was Amy. Would you all like to hear that whole story? Okay. Awesome. You're an inquisitive group. I appreciate that. So, got some backstory to tell. It's going to take a while to get there. So, my mom, I'm the fourth of four boys, and she had the first three, one right after another, just like a vending machine, just kaboom, boom, boom, kaboom. And so she goes to the doctor and was like, make this stop. And so they gave her birth control, okay? Now, this is when birth control had first been invented, and it was not very safe. They actually made it too strong, and it messed up a lot of women, including my mother. A lot of things hormonally were just kind of thrown out of balance. And so when she decided that she wanted to try and have another child, they went to her and said, oh, well, guess what? Now you'll never have children because of just what this medicine has done to you. So fast forward 7 years, and she is incredibly sick, very ill, go to the doctor, and guess what? It's me. Because I'm a swimmer. And did everybody get that that's going to get that? Let's move forward. So here's the thing that I haven't told you yet. The plan was to have 2 boys and 2 girls. She wanted a girl really bad. She was not going to have a boy. She was going to will herself to produce a little girl. And nothing was going to stop that. They did not even pick out a boy's name. They picked out a girl's name, Amy. So, I come to term, I'm knocking at the door, and I'm about to come into the world. And so, here's the very serious part. Because of what the medicine did to her, because of some other conditions that she had, basically giving birth to her almost killed her. They had to do a tracheotomy on her. Her hormones, while giving birth to me, were thrown so far out of whack, she was blind for 2 weeks after giving birth to me. I only know of one other person that knows of another person that that's happened to. So here's the awesome communication part. Are you ready? My dad brings me into the room and says, "Okay, honey, here's Amy." I'm not making this up. Did not tell her anything. Told her nothing. And it wasn't until 2 weeks later where her sight comes back and she's changing me. They never told her anything. She's changing my diaper and goes, "Huh. I guess we need to pick another name." And that was the model for communication throughout my entire childhood. I mean, there was like, there could have been landmines in our front yard, and they would have been like, "Oh, he'll figure it out." They didn't teach me how to throw a ball. They didn't teach me how to ride a bike. They didn't teach me about these are the kinds of people you date. They didn't teach me study skills. I was not taught anything. And if every now and again you're wondering, why is Barry like Barry? There's a lot of the reasoning right there. And I never had a sounding board. I was never able to come back in from the world and just say, "Hey, this is what's going on. Can somebody explain that to me?" And there was just none of that. There's none of that. There was no warnings. There was no soundboard. There was no, well, here's what the Bible means when you experience this, and then the Bible says this. There was none of that. And here's the thing. It doesn't matter how old you are, you still need that. It doesn't matter how old you get, you can live to be 200. You need a sounding board. You need someone that you can say, "Hey, this is what I just went through. Can you relate to this? The Bible says this, but I'm going through this. How do I marry those two things?" We all need that, no matter how old we get. And that's what accountability provides. It provides us with not just a sounding board, but a Christian sounding board. One where we can navigate this thing called life and do it in a Christian, godly way. So what I want to talk to you today about is 4 benefits that come from accountability, because it's a hard sell, okay? I'm not going to sugarcoat this. Accountability to another person, that is a difficult thing for me to sell to you. And because it means risk, it means trust, it means opening up. And so I want to talk to you about what that provides, what the Bible talks about, and then just hopefully encourage you that this is not just a nice thing to have, it's a necessary thing. And it's one of the things that the church is founded on. It's one of the things that the church is founded on us helping each other, encouraging each other, lifting each other up, and sending each other in the right direction. Okay? So, first thing is this. And if you look inside your bulletin, you'll see somewhere in your bulletin there's some notes. There's also a link that you can take a look at, and that will take you to basically all my notes typed out. I know it's really long, sorry. It's just the date followed by SER notes. So, the first thing that we see is this. Accountability with another person, and as I go through this morning, let me just go ahead and give you one more side note. As I walk through this, I'm not just talking about accountability with a single person, that can also be with a group of people, okay? It comes in many forms. It can be through a connection group. It can be 3 guys meeting on a somewhat regular basis. It can be 2 guys meeting, but you want to make sure that whatever form that takes, that you have that, okay? So, 1 Peter 5:5 shows us that the first thing accountability does is that it teaches us humility. It teaches us humility. 1 Peter 5:5 says this: "In the same way, you who are younger must accept the authority of the elders." There's a lot of verses using this same word of humility about submitting to someone else. They talk about employees to bosses. They talk about it children to parents, older to younger, those under authority to those in authority. It just goes on and on. And so he goes on to say this, "And all of you," so he's addressing everyone that the letter is sent to, "dress yourselves in humility as you relate to one another, for God opposes the proud, but gives grace to the humble." Here's the problem. we have this running dialogue. We actually have two of them. There are these two running dialogues that go through our head all the time. The first one and the most prevalent one is, we're no good, we're not good enough, we're never going to do as well, and we tend to just kind of beat ourselves up. I can't believe you made that mistake. I can't believe you did that. And we tend to beat ourselves up quite a bit. We say things that we would to ourselves that we'd never say to another human being. And we also have the extreme opposite problem where we start to see ourselves way too awesome. We compare ourselves to someone else for whatever reason, and we see ourselves as better than that other person. I've made better decisions, or I have a better marriage, or I have a better job, or I'm better this. I'm doing better spiritually, or well, you were until you started saying that to yourself. We have this thing where we just kind of look down on others because of where we might be in comparison to where they might be. And there is something about going to another human being and saying, you know what? I struggle with blank. And that other person saying, yeah, me too. That does wonders in leveling the playing field. We immediately begin to realize that we're not as awesome as we think we are at times, and we're not as despicable as we think we are either. And so, when we are accountable to someone else, the humility is very, very important. Because very often we have a lot of reasons for not talking to anybody about anything. There's so many. A lot of it has to do with the fact that we just have this pride that we have very difficult time swallowing. Maybe there's this idea of an image that we're supposed to project. We have to look a certain way. And let me tell you, as a pastor in a church, I struggle with that a lot. And so sometimes there's this idea of a mask that we're supposed to wear or an image that we have to portray, and that keeps us from opening up to others. But it is so very important that we see ourselves the way God sees us. And something about accountability when we just say, you know what, I'm dealing with this, yeah, me too. That really levels the playing field and helps us see things as they really are. I don't care what issue you're going through. I don't care what sin you're struggling with. I don't care what problem you have. I guarantee you there's somebody, not a somebody, multiple somebodies who is going through the exact same thing or something very, very similar. Every now and again I'll do just some very mild counseling. And somebody will come to me and they go, well, I'm really, and they're just, you can see them wearing this blanket of shame. And they'll say, well, I'm dealing with blank. And I go, yeah, I've run into that many times. And they're just stunned. So you're not alone. Accountability shows us that we're not alone and that we should not be alone. Okay? Very important. All right. Next thing that we see is that it builds a healthy dependence. Accountability builds a healthy dependence. Not codependence, okay, but dependence and interdependence, where we realize that we should be helping others and they should be helping us. Ecclesiastes 4, verse 9 says this. Reading on to verse 12, it says, 2 people are better off than one, for they can help each other succeed. If one person falls, the other can reach out and help. But someone who falls alone is in real trouble. Likewise, 2 people lying close together can keep each other warm, but how can one be warm alone? A person standing alone can be attacked and defeated, but 2 can stand back to back and conquer. 3 are even better, for a triple braided cord is not easily broken. I think that especially here, Fort Bragg being a stone's throw away, I think the idea of dependence physically is something that we all understand, okay? And I'm going to talk to the guys, especially the military guys, for just a second. Women, they can just open up. They have no problem. Here are my emotions. They just get together in a room. One has a box of wine just magically appears, and they just, here's what I'm going with. But the guys, it's a lot harder. We got that image that we wanted to protect. And so we often bottled this up. And physically, I think we understand this concept, especially the idea of teamwork, especially in the military. You know, after be all that you can be, after that slogan was replaced, they replaced it with an army of one, which is the most ridiculous thing that you could ever use. Isn't that contradictory, army of one? That's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it? It's like airline food or Microsoft Works. They don't go together. And that slogan lasted maybe 2 years because they thought to themselves, oh, wait, we have more than one. And so they said, we need to change this. And they did, and it was Army Strong. And the reason they got rid of it was because they said it went directly against the whole concept of teamwork. Something that is absolutely vital, something that is drilled into military men and women and should be. And so that was gone. But one of the things that we as men struggle with very much is the idea of interdependence when it comes to things that are mental and emotional. And we have a hard time opening up in those areas and even convince ourselves, no, I don't need anyone. I can handle this on my own. And it's so, and it's just as untrue as the idea of an army of one. One of the things that science has proven over and over again, surveys have proven, studies of all kinds, is that one of the greatest indicators of your well-being as a person, your fulfillment in life, and the longevity of your life are the number of social interactions that you have and the kind of interactions that you have. That is the single greatest indicator of not only self-fulfillment, but the longevity of your life. You will live longer depending on the kinds of relationships that you have. And I'm telling you, folks, we have to get past the whole idea of the image to protect. I can handle this on my own. We've got to let that stuff go. Not only because it goes in both directions. We have to realize that there's two sides of a coin here. Not only do I need other people, but I need other people to need me. Those aren't wants or likes or nice things. Those are needs. I need other people, and I need other people to need me. And we have to get that idea down. And there's a lot of you out there, you're struggling with certain things, but you're just taking them and you're just wadding them up into a little ball and shoving it way down into your chest until one day it's going to come out. We've got to learn, and there's more I could say about that, but I just can't stress to you enough the need of healthy dependence, okay? Healthy dependence. And being able to go to somebody and just saying, someone you can trust, someone you can open up to and just say, this is, mentally, physically, whatever, emotionally, these are the things that I'm struggling with, okay? All right. Second thing is this. Accountability provides an outside view. Accountability provides an outside view. And like I said before, there are things that I would go out into the world, I would go to school, or I would, play some game or something, and I would run into something and not know how to process it because I would come home and just not really get the feedback that I needed. And that is something that we still need to this very day. Let me read to you from Jeremiah 17:9. First, it says, "The human heart is the most deceitful of all things and desperately wicked. Who really knows how bad it is?" We need an outside view for two reasons. First of all, we tend to downplay our sins. We tend to downplay our shortcomings and our faults. We start saying things like, well, that's just who I am, or everybody does it, or I deserve this, yeah, but you don't know what I'm going through, and the list goes on. And we tend to take the things that we shouldn't be doing and just put them in a different light. There's a guy named Neil Plantinga who says this very well. He says, we deny, suppress, or minimize what we know to be true. We assert, adorn, and elevate what we know to be false. We prettyify ugly realities and sell ourselves the prettyified versions. Thus, a liar might transform, I tell a lot of lies to shore up my pride, into occasionally I finesse the truth in order to spare other people's feelings. So we tend to just take those things that we're struggling with and just kind of put a twist on them that just makes them, in our thinking, not nearly as bad as we think. And we need somebody on the outside looking in to say, yeah, but have you looked at it from this point of view? I'm coming in from an outside view. I'm on the outside looking in. Have you looked at it from this point of view? And the other reason that we need an outside view is because of our lack of experience. Sin and a lack of experience. So here's something that happened one day. We have lectured our girls endlessly about the need to, when it comes to dating and finding a boyfriend and getting married, finding the right boy. We have lectured them just to ad nauseum. We have just told them over and over and over again, just, please, 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 that 90% of your happiness or 90% of your misery will come from your marriage. There is no in between. And so one day, my daughter, I'm not going to tell you which one, I've been told not to, and she said, Dad, I want you to know that if I'm dating a boy and you and Mom don't like that boy, I will immediately break up with him. Yes, that's the correct response. As someone raising daughters, one of the things that I've learned is that little girls are made of sugar and spice and lies. And so I said, I'm going to need this on tape. And so I actually recorded a video of her saying that so that when she gets married, I can open it up, show it to her, and just say, yeah, I don't like this guy. We need to call this off. But one of the things that she has not experienced yet is infatuation. She hasn't been there yet. Never experienced it. She's had, she's had the occasional crush, but she hasn't had that infatuation. When you were growing up in school and you saw that guy or that girl and you got tunnel vision. Everything they did was marvelous. They were an angel from heaven, dropped to earth. And she hasn't been through that yet. And so I tried very hard after making fun of her to just explain there's some things that you haven't quite experienced yet. And here's the thing, folks. No matter how old you get, there will be things that you have not experienced yet. And we need somebody just a little bit ahead of us that we can go to and just say, I'm going through this. Can you help me figure this out? And it doesn't matter if you're going to experience things that you're never going to experience until you're in your 50s. There are things that you're going to experience that you will never experience until you're in your 60s. How many of you, anyone 40 or over? Okay. Do you remember just going to bed, having done nothing all day, and you wake up the next day and your knee hurts? What is that? I didn't experience that until I was in my 40s. My wife goes, what's wrong with you? I said, I think I need new sheets. I don't know what's wrong with me. There are so many things that you're not going to experience until you're older. And you need someone to come along and just say, this is what I'm going through. Help me give me the outside view. Help me make sense of this. Okay? Because we downplay our sins, and we need somebody to help us walk through those experiences. So, I think I've put that out there. So, the last one is this. Accountability promotes ownership. Accountability promotes ownership. This is so important. So, psychologists they'll tell you that you can kind of put people in two types of groups, okay? And this is a phenomenon called locus of control or location of control. And there are people who look at the world in the sense that the location of control is outside of themselves. Life just happens to them. There's nothing that they can do to combat that. You know, if I get fired, well, I just got fired. There was nothing I could do about it. You know, if the company steals my pension, there's nothing I can do. If I get injured, there's nothing I can do. And so all of the control is actually outside of ourselves. And then we have the other group that says, no, the control is right here. I can control that. And even if I break my leg in a way that is, you know, somebody hits me in a car accident, totally not my fault, whatever happens to me, I still have control in how I react to that situation and how I recover from that situation. And so the location of control, they see that as being within them. So even if it's something, you know, it does happen to them, how they react to it is at the very least they can control it that way. And after reading about this, I realized sort of another little side phenomenon. If somebody believes that the location of control is outside of themselves, and they are a Christian, and God is sovereign, God's in control of all things, then who gets the blame whenever something bad happens to them? Yeah, God does. Even though God gave us brains and arms and hands and legs so that we can take care of things. Okay? So yeah, in every situation, things happen to us, but we can control what takes place. And there's something about going to somebody and saying, this is what I'm dealing with, and them asking you, how are you dealing with that situation? How are you doing when it comes to that bad habit? How are you doing when it comes to fixing this issue? Where we begin to say, I have control in this. I have, it's going to vary depending on the situation, but I have the ability to influence, I have the ability to control this. And we take responsibility for what it is that we are going through. There's a verse of scripture that speaks to this. This is from Galatians 6. I read verse 1 last week, talking about how you who are godly restore those that have kind of strayed away. They're overcome by sin. I want to start there and then continue on for several verses. Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer, again, Galatians 6, starting at verse 1, okay? Dear brothers and sisters, if another believer is overcome by some sin, you who are godly should gently and humbly help that person back onto the right path. And be careful not to fall into the same temptation yourself. Share each other's burdens, and in this way, obey the law of Christ. We'll come back to that later. If you think you are too important to help someone, you are only fooling yourself. And here's my favorite part of the passage. You are not that important. A lot of us need to hear that. Pay careful attention to your own work, for then you will get the satisfaction of a job well done. And you won't need to compare yourself to anyone else. Verse 5, for we are each responsible for our own conduct. I run into this every time I go to the gym. There's two kinds of guys in relation to you. You know, when a person walks into the gym, there's two groups. There are the people that aren't doing quite as good as you are, and then there are the people doing way better than you are. And I'll never forget going to the gym and seeing this one guy. I don't know if he had been in a coma for the last 20 years, but he was this big around. I mean, he was just rail thin. And there are these barbells that have the weights already on them, and they have them in various sizes, you know, all the way up to, I don't know, and then like all the way down to like 10, 15 pounds. And he had the smallest ones. It looked like there were teacups on the ends of the bar. And he has it, and he's picked it up, and he's trying to lift it over his head, and his arms are shaking, and he screamed. And I remember, this is horrible, I remember thinking to myself, yeah, I'm doing okay. I'm doing all right. And then you see someone from the other group where the person has biceps the size of your head. I mean, they are, shoulders, biceps, forearms. I mean, there's, I'm just like, whoa. And just, and you look at that guy and you're thinking, I'm not doing that great. And I have to remind myself over and over again, you're only in competition with yourself. And there's something about that constant comparing to others that is so destructive. And when we start saying, okay, but the person that I'm fighting, the person I'm in competition with really is myself, we begin to take responsibility for it. We don't see ourselves too highly, we don't see ourselves too lowly, and then we really begin to do what needs to be done. And we need to do this especially when it comes to those things, those sins, those bad habits that we justify, especially when we say, well, that's just the way I am. We have the ability to do these things and and to overcome these things. And it's so very important that we take responsibility for it. And when you've got somebody once a month just saying to you, hey, how are you doing with X? It goes a long way in reminding you of who is really responsible for what you're dealing with. I blame my parents for a lot of things. That whole idea of, responsibility and so forth. This is a weird thing to be mad at them for, but one of the things that I was angriest at them for was they didn't really teach me study habits. They didn't really teach me how to just buckle down, study, read a book, do the problem, and my grades reflected it. They reflected that. And I'll never forget, from my 20-year high school reunion, I went to my old history teacher, and Mr. Johnson, and I got to go see him again, and I talked to him, and one of the first things I just said was, I'm sorry. I was not a good student. And I was so angry at them for not being able to just to dig in to a problem, a situation, whatever it is, and tackle it the way that a person with that type A personality can tackle it. I have more of a C- personality. And it just, I was never able to tackle things the way that I wanted to. And then one day, I had to come to the realization, you know what, Barry? They, in seeing how they were raised, they did better comparatively. They actually did a pretty good job when you consider their upbringing. And you want to talk about a bitter pill to swallow, where I just had to say, you know what? Looking at what they went through, they did okay. And that was really tough. But what happened was, it shifted the blame and the responsibility from those guys to me. None of us are responsible for the way that we were raised. All of us are responsible for overcoming the shortcomings in how we were raised. As I was thinking about, just to wrap up here, as I was thinking about accountability, I couldn't help but think about learning how to ride a bike. And I don't know if I mentioned this yet or not, but my parents, like I said, they didn't teach me anything, including they did not teach me how to ride a bike. They just didn't teach me. They bought me a bike, but they did not imbue the instruction. They're just like, bike. And I was just like, okay, so what do I do now? Ride it. And, and then that was it. That was all the instruction. Do you know who taught me how to ride a bike? My brother-in-law. I was 25 years old. Do you know what the definition of awkward is? It's a grown man teaching another grown man. how to ride a bike. I just, the only thing missing was like a beanie with a propeller on top. I'm going to ride the bike. And so I get on the bike, and, when you get on the bike and you're 6, it's adorable. When you're 25, it's not. It's the opposite of adorable. And so, you know how long it took him to teach me how to ride a bike? 2 minutes. 2 minutes. Because he just said, Barry, when you fall, turn into the fall. I was like, oh, okay. Holy crap, I can ride a bike. And that was it. And I can't help but think of the number of other things that would have only taken 2 minutes. But when I went to him, and we had this agreement to never speak of this and to teach me how to ride the bike, it was very awkward. And let me just be real upfront with you about this, okay? Because I'm not going to sugarcoat this for you. It is going to be awkward. If you open yourself up to somebody and you reveal who you are, it's going to involve risk. It's going to involve trust. It's going to involve a little bit of awkwardness, okay? So I'm not going to pretend like that does not exist. But it's so very important. And it's amazing to me because, it's very rare that I share that story. I still can't believe I shared that story. But he never told anybody, and yet he was willing to do that. He didn't point and laugh. He just said, "All right, here's a bike," and he just taught me how. And it's still very comical to me to this day. But it's such a perfect illustration of accountability, especially how it can be a little bit weird. But just the idea of that risk and just opening yourself up to somebody, and the benefits that can take place when you do. Okay? At this time, I'm going to ask the worship team to come on up. I want to remind you that as we close, if you're wanting to begin that relationship with Christ, it's something you've been thinking about, and you're ready to take that step, we have our blue bags. We have some on the stage at each corner, but we also have them on the back 2 bookshelves. If you pick one of these up, don't leave. Somebody will come alongside and just explain to you in very simple terms what it means to be a follower of Christ. We also have our communion stations open, one in the back, one in the front. There's a couple places where you can pray. Right over here, they'll pray with you. Some ladies and some lanyards right over there. If you want them to, just ask. And then one back over here too. And one last thing, if you're wanting to get more involved in the church, we have something called a First Step Talk. As you go into the tent building, you'll see Pastor Tim. He'll be standing there, and he'll direct you in there to talk to you about how to get a little bit more, just 10 minutes to talk to you a little bit about getting more involved in the church. But earlier, I read to you a verse about how when we submit to one another, when we're humble before each other, we're encouraging each other, that we are fulfilling the law of Christ. Folks, that's what the church is based on. That's why the church exists. We all have Bibles. We could all go home and just read our Bible on our own and do our own thing. We could do ministry without going through a church. But that's not the key. That's not one of the key. One of the key reasons that we have church is to encourage one another, uplift one another, and help each other stay on the right track. To know that we're not alone. To know that I'm going through the same thing that other guy is. And there's others going through what I'm going through. And to have a little bit of boldness and courage when we navigate this thing called life. There's a time where Jesus, remember when he was sending people out, he was sending them out to heal people and to preach the good news. And he sent them out how? 2 by 2. There's a lot of confidence that comes when you are with another person and you're doing the things that need to be done, especially when you're doing things like helping others, serving others, and ministering to others, as God calls us to do. And so that ability is something that's just very foundational to the church. That's why we're here. So my challenge to you is this, is to think about some of these things. Because like I said, I know that this is difficult for some of you, just the idea of accountability and opening yourself up. And I don't want to sugarcoat this. But the risk is worth it. find someone, same gender, someone who shows themselves to be trustworthy, and just say, hey, would you like a little bit of help navigating this Christian life thing? And you may be pretty surprised at people who are willing to do that. So that's my challenge to you, because at no time does Jesus think that we should be doing this on our own. Are we willing to drop the mask, the image, and the pride, and really start living the way that Jesus has called us to live?